Okay, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Little bit of quick housekeeping. Your microphone, your camera is off for this session. The chat is open the entire time. If you have any questions during the session, type them in. I probably won't address them unless they're technical about the presentation. We'll do our best to answer them. In the meantime, we'll just collate your questions towards the end. I do have a lot of time at the end for questions. I didn't want to make this presentation overly long. I also want to thank Alison Cousins for facilitating this. She's taking care of the Q&A as well as a lot of the technical support on it. So I really appreciate that, Alison. I just want to start with a simple observation from across the food industry as it stands now. I've been researching this for a reasonable amount of time, looking for examples, trying to see what's really happening with a number of different dimensions on it. AI is being used in food safety systems in a lot of different ways, quietly, inconsistently, not always being forward about it being done. And certainly in most cases without a lot of control. It's not in theory, it's not going to happen, it's happening now. There are a lot of people that don't use it, fair enough. I've seen HACCP plans generated through AI, I've seen audit reports reviewed, generated, corrective actions drafted by AI. Quite often they add value. I am a supporter of the safe utilization and thoughtful utilization of AI in food safety, but I think sometimes it introduces risks and it introduces a lot of unknowns when people aren't as clear about where it's being used and not. So that's really the point of this session. I'm not talking about whether it's good or bad. I want to identify where it adds value, where it creates risks, and how we as people who are truly responsible leaders in food safety, technical leaders, consultants, auditors, maintain control over these things. Fundamentally, food safety is not an exercise. It's about real decisions and real facilities with real consequences. What I want to walk through today is practical. Where it fits into the typical audit and food safety certification life cycle, what it does well, where it fails, and how to use it in ways that strengthen rather than weaken the integrity of it. The key message I want you to keep throughout this is AI does not reduce the need for expertise or experts. It amplifies the consequences, good and bad, of how that expertise is applied. So that's what we're going to do today. One clarification, I am focusing on very typical large language models with the use of AI. That's things like Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, all of those commercial available programs. There's a whole nother realm beyond this. I was asked after I did that LinkedIn session to a lot of very basic questions from people who just wanted some basic information. I said that's what this is. By no means a masterclass. This is really about the basics. Get to know what's there. So why it matters. Audit complexity is increasing. Audits are getting more complex. How they're applied, how they're utilized, how the data within them is evaluated. It's becoming more important, and like applying for a job, a lot of this stuff is being reviewed through AI type systems. So it's important to understand how they work. Auditor inconsistency it's what auditors are. I mean, people are not clones. People will approach audits differently because they have different backgrounds, different knowledge levels, different experience levels. But sometimes often that consistency is a good thing. I'm a big fan. Sometimes it does create problems. There is a lot of pressure for efficiency, cost efficiency, time efficiency. I mean, everything, we all know costs for everything are going up, and having an auditor on site for longer than is necessary is an unnecessary cost, and we have to look at that. But we cannot use it. We can't exchange depth of the audit quality for efficiency. So really, we want to look at AI as a tool to standardize thinking and outcomes. We want to be able to accelerate some simplified processes. We want to be able to expand coverage. For example, an auditor who has a 200-page, if you're an audit reviewer and you've got a 200-page audit review, a good portion of the basics can be covered by AI. I wouldn't rely entirely on AI. I'm not advocating for that, but it can certainly do a big pre-screening and catch out a lot of very basic things, or at least identify areas to focus on. So it effectiveness and efficiency. What AI is not, remember, it's a large language model. It basically strings together words based on them. It's read everything that was available on the internet at some point. And what it does is it strings together series of words based on the most probable next word. That's the simplest way to look at it. So if you say, what's 2 plus 2? It doesn't add up 2 plus 2. It doesn't do the math. It simply says, okay, everything I've read, the next thing after 2, what is 2 plus 2 is equals 4. That's the answer it's going to give you. It doesn't know right and wrong. It didn't do the math. It's giving you the most likely outcome. That's a good thing. It's programmed. The other thing to remember when you're using it, you've probably seen this. It is programmed to behave like social media. What's one of the big things in social media? Getting that dopamine hit. It is built to do that. Those of you who have used a large language model, an AI, have gotten, you ask it to clarify, or can you change this a little bit? It's, oh, you're brilliant. That's a great idea. I think, here, I'll do that for you. So it always does give you, it compliments you. I want you to continue using it. That's part of the program. That's part of the product that you're utilizing. It also will offer to go deeper and to do more. One thing you have to be very cautious of is every time you ask, it offers a new iteration, it averages down. It gives you a more common answer. So it doesn't dig deeper. It just averages things out more and more. If you continue to go, you're going to go in circles and end up with nothing in the end. Again, those of you who've used it and have gone down that rabbit hole where it says, oh, I can give you a better presentation. I can give you something more concise. I can throw in this. I can do this. It gets to a point of the output. If you're letting it make up the prompts, basically, when that happens. It's not doing what you want. It's suggesting what everybody else did with that same position, and it brings it down to a really bland beige average in the end. So it is about prompting, and it's about initial thoughtful prompting that really starts it. Remembering it is going to encourage you to do more. It is a social media. It's going to ask you to, go to the next video, go to the next video. It's going to give you that prompt to do that. Slow down. Ask it to do what you want, so it gives you what you're looking for, not necessarily what it wants to simply continue the conversation with. Prompting, the question you ask, it is all about that. We're going to touch on that. But if you give weak or repetitive or confused prompting, it's going to give you, that's exactly the slop it's going to give you. You've heard the term slop. It's really easy to get there. You want to be very thoughtful in what you're doing. And if you're doing a repetitive task, so if you're going to review all of your supplier audits, you're going to do a pre-review using AI, you want to use exactly the same prompt for everyone. So that's where you're not going to type in to ChatGPT, review this audit based on this audit protocol. You're going to create a big, long prompt, and you can use the same one for every audit report so that you can see it's going to be able to recognize patterns, and you're going to have more consistent outcomes. So remember, AI is pattern recognition plus language prediction. I know what this pattern is. I know what the next word is. It doesn't understand anything. It has no professional judgment. It does not know food safety. It mimics it. So it can identify, if you put in your CCP flowchart, it can identify what's missing. In the, this is, it's seen 1,000 other CCP flowcharts for this industry. It can tell you what's probably missing. That's great, but it can't predict. It can't look at specific risks if it doesn't know your facility, if it doesn't know your culture, if it doesn't know your people. It is good for rapid document analysis, things like SOPs, your HACCP plans, your procedures. Great for pattern recognition. It'll show you where there are differences, where this is inconsistent with the pattern you're using, or it doesn't have the right outcomes, or critical control point identification, or documentation requirements. So it's great for comparative things like that. The limitations, it will always give you an answer called hallucination. There are times where it will make something up because either it's been programmed or taught with bad information, which is possible. Let's face it, all of these large language models learn from the internet. We know there's a significant portion of crap on the internet. So it could give you bad answers simply because they're common. It could literally just make things up. And this is where prompting has to be very clear. And when you go down that rabbit hole of letting it prompt you to, how about this? Do you want this? Can I change it like this? That's where you're going to run into more hallucinations. It's confident. It's giving you an answer. And remember, it's programmed to satisfy you. So all large language models are there to satisfy you. It's very unlikely they will come up and say, I don't know. It might say, I can't do that, but it won't say, I don't know. It will always give you an answer. Be cautious of that. There are no real world, it's limited to the prompts you give it. So there's no site culture, there's no equipment condition, there's no human dynamic behavior going on that's being fed into this unless you put it in separately. So the real world observation part isn't there. And it can't verify anything. So if you went to a basic large language model, put in your HACCP plan and said, give me, are these validation mechanisms correct for my HACCP plan? It will say yes or no. If you say, can you prove it? It doesn't know. So it's going on what it learned from all of its teaching and training, but it doesn't really, you're the expert. So those people that are using it, you're not being replaced, you're being more efficient. So it validates what looks correct, but it can ignore real world inputs or applications. So where can you use it? Where is it good? Where have I seen it used well? Document review. It's great. And you could put in comparative documents. Here's my metal detector check procedure. And here are 25 production records with checks on them. Do they all match up? It's great. It is identifying risk. It's great. So if you're going into a facility, you can, again, based on your prompt, you don't simply say, I'm going into a dairy. I'm going into a dairy that uses in this part of the world under this jurisdiction, making these products. Typically, this is the season. These are the issues that have come up. I want you to base your assessment on actual nonconformities, complaints that have been publicly annotated. So you can, the more you give it, the more it can do as far as risk profiling, so that you go in being able to focus. So yeah, typically as an auditor, I would go in with my experience. So I'm going to go into audit a dairy. I've worked in a dairy. I know what I'm going to go in at a risk, but by doing a pre-audit risk profile, I'm also theoretically including 1,000 other people who have audited a dairy, their perspective on risks. So I'm going to get some different ideas. I'm not going to take them all as gospel, but they could be good. It can definitely enhance the checklist I want to go through in this particular. So as an auditor for preparation, it can help me build a really good checklist, not just a standardized one. It can review my report. Did I miss anything? Does it make sense? Is what I've said answer the questions that this standard requires? Once here's the optimal result. Have I put in all of the parts that it's looking for? Looking at corrective action, making sure they match is a very good system. I'm a little cautious about full system creation. Would I use it for my HACCP plan to build it? I'd use it as a guide. Drafting procedures, absolutely. Writing procedures, absolutely not. Drafting training, absolutely. Writing training, absolutely not. Remember, it can do everything for you. You just don't know if it's going to do it well. Think of the AI models that are available as really gung-ho, enthusiastic, completely inexperienced support team. I've graduated, I've studied, I've got a little bit of industry experience. I've read the standard, I know it, I've done all the training. I'm here for my first audit. That's basically what these things are good for. You're not going to let them go on their own. Okay, they're great. They can gather stuff. They're going to make mistakes. It all does come down to prompting. Prompting is the question. The simpler the question you ask, the simpler and more generic answer it's going to give you and less valuable. When you think of how to prompt, think of people in the UK are going to get this GCSE. What's the goal? What do I want when I'm when I'm writing a prompt? What do I want this AI model to give me? Context, huge. what level of speaking, what level of culture, what, frame yourself as I am an expert in microbiology and dairy science, and I've got 30 years of audit experience and 10 years of work experience in it. And here's the industry they've been in. They're a relatively new startup. They're only 5 years old. They're staffed. So everything you can put in detail about that. Sources. What can it draw on to answer? Very simple. I only, if you're doing research, I only want you to utilize industry recognized annotated research from universities. So the better you guardrail where it's going to look for stuff, it will listen to you. So use it. And then E would be expectations. How do you want the output? What is it? Do you want a checklist? Do you want a bullet point list? Do you want a summary? What do you want? Who's the audience for? What level of language? What language do you want this written in? All of that you're going to use to build a big prompt. The more specific, the better. Now, if you're going to do something repetitive, so if I'm going to look at all of my, I'm going to pick a FSSC audit reports from all of my suppliers. I may write a 2-page long prompt on how I want them reviewed. And then I'm just going to use that same prompt. I'm going to cut and paste, just upload a new audit report, upload and give the same prompt. So again, I'm getting the same evaluation. It would be the same thing as asking 2 different reviewers to review 2 different audit reports. They're going to come at it from a different perspective, or 2 different auditors to review 2 different plans. They're not going to be as consistent. The differences are sometimes valuable. The quality of the output you get is entirely dependent on the precision of the prompt you put in. Remember, it behaves like a junior, really gung-ho, but it has no context. So if you say something like review this HACCP plan, you're going to get generic feedback, missed risks. It's basically like holding up a HACCP plan to an auditor and saying, is this okay? When you say evaluate it against Codex HACCP, specific to the dairy industry, specifically for facilities that are certified to a beer, that are looking to obtain a BRCGS certification, you're going to get a much better output. Another good application for it is the HACCP review. Using it as a second set of eyes, right? So here's the process. You upload the HACCP plan. Now, people have the question of, oh, I don't want to give my HACCP plan away to the world on the internet. Most large language models don't retain anything. They can't. You can imagine all the stuff people are using AI to produce, all the pictures, all the videos, everything else. There is no way that could be stored. If all the storage in the world was utilized, you'd fill it up instantly. So it doesn't keep anything. It doesn't upload anything. It doesn't use your HACCP plan to evaluate somebody else's. That being said, you can add the prompt, anything I upload is not to be used in your learning program. You can tell it that, and it will, in theory, listen to it. I'm a little bit more of a skeptic too. I also figure that if anything you've got digital is available to somebody online. So by simply saying, oh, I'm going to keep it on the cloud using Outlook or using SAP or using some other database program, it's digital, it's available, and let's face it, if I had the best HACCP plan in the world, I would rather, it's not a competitive advantage. I would rather everybody use it and protect the entire industry than keep it to myself and let somebody else fail. So, that whole process of what you're giving it, how you're asking it to assess it, against what standards, what you want as an outcome, are there any hazard gaps, and assess mitigation. So that's kind of the set of prompts you're going to give, and you're going to extend that as much as you need to. Remember the limitation. It cannot validate real hazard significance. And it may flag missing risks, but it doesn't know if it's valid. You forgot to have Listeria on here, not knowing that in this particular process step, in this, because of further processing steps, it's not an issue. Another good application, audit report analysis. It can clean up the audit language. So, you know, I mean, those of you who've done auditing, you know, you're sitting there taking a ton of notes. One of the big challenges is trying to turn those notes into a good report, and then taking that report and writing the summaries. It tends to do very good at that. Again, as long as you prompt the guardrails of what you're looking for. I want a one-page summary of everything in this audit, just highlighting the identified risks and two really highlights, positive highlights out of here. It will tell you. It will also tell you, look at the entire thing and say, you know what, based on this 200-page audit report and all the details you gave me, it's very clear that initial training, onboarding training of new staff is a consistent weak point being identified, or could be a root cause analysis against many of the non-issues that are identified. So it does a very good job of that. Again, same thing with the recurring stuff. It can separate between point and systemic failures, so the tactical versus strategic. It will definitely point out where you didn't put evidence against something to satisfy the expectation, and it will absolutely call out the repetitive stuff, so it can clean up your audit report. It can do a very nice job. Those of you who have used, I mean, personally, that I use it for that a lot. If I'm going to write, if I'm going to write a report, if I'm going to write, you know, to write something like this, I did my research. You know, various sources. I had my own background knowledge. I did my research. I had all my talking points. I listed them out. So I was, you know, okay, I've got everything I want for this webinar, but it's like 4 pages of just mishmash brain dump. My struggle was always getting that into a coherent, consistent message. So I did great job of getting all the stuff. I was just horrible at organizing. So that's what I used a language model or large language model for, was, so here's my prompt. Here's what I want. I'm doing a webinar. Here's the expected audience. Here's the amount of time I want. Here's the number of slides I want. Here's me. Here's all my background. And here's my thoughts. Give me a concise synopsis that I could read through in under 30 minutes. And I find that useful. It does a pretty good job. I don't go from there and say I'm done, but it did the task of organizing. So it's that really good junior support staff who can run out and take care of that organization for me, which was my weak point. Another good application that's very useful is corrective action review. I've been pretty impressed with its evaluation of root cause analysis when you look at a whole audit outcome. So, you know, if you look at one nonconformance and look at the corrective action for that, it's okay. It's, you know, I don't think it does any better or it's any more efficient than the standard auditor. But when you look at the entire set of nonconformances and the audit findings, I think it does a pretty good job at drilling down to potentially finding some unique root causes for it, or at least evaluating the root causes. And so again, this comes from two sides. I'm a site that got audited. I should be using it to make sure I'm doing the best possible closure of my nonconformances based on root cause analysis. And as a auditor, the auditor who has to review that, I could certainly use it to evaluate from that perspective, to give a broader view. And my expertise, my experience is great. Taking a broader view is even better. It can look at flaky responses. You can upload the last 3 years audit reports from this site and say, here's the final one. What are they not doing right? And it will sift through 600 pages of audit report and say, you know what, the last 2 times, you found this 3 times in a row, or you found these different things at different times. Here's a real root cause you're missing, that if you take it all in context, it can see a bigger picture. The nice thing about AI is it's got an infinite ability to view the landscape, whereas we tend to focus a fair bit. We need to. It can't, for the desk-based verification, I think it's good. Making sure the responses are complete and full, I think they're good. The risk is it can accept well-written but really weak actions. And again, if you've got, you know, I think if you're adding it up, so if the site builds their procedure using AI, and the auditor audits the procedure based on AI, and then the site writes the non-conformance based on AI, and the auditor evaluates it based on AI, you know, you're dumbing down based on averages. You need the interjection and the true assessment of the experience of the individual. I think that's always important, which is why I think it's using it selectively, knowingly, transparently, big word, is hugely important. So you can using it as a review layer, not as a primary auditor. So you can use it as a pre-assessment. The auditor does their work. You can and then you can use it as a consistency check afterwards. It reduces the bias that either side brings in, either the auditor or the AI. It will identify gaps where the auditor really didn't, they just added fluff, or wait a minute, that's the same answer you give to every site on that question. It can flag misses. So the optimal model really, I think, is human judgment. AI augments it. AI handles the volume, the structure, the repetitiveness. The human handles the context, the risk prioritization, and the decision making. So again, if you look at AI enhancing expertise, not replacing it, I think that's the place we really want to be. Uncontrolled. Now, this is speaking to more the director level, the higher level. You're in charge of food safety for 10 sites. You're the technical manager or technical director at a certification body. These are the things you really need to worry about. There is the risk of data confidentiality. Like I said, I don't particularly think uploading something into an AI model is any different than using cloud storage or using email or anything else. But it has to be aware, and legally, I think everybody should be, if you're going to use, I think you should explain how, why, and what your guardrails are before you upload that audit report or that HACCP plan or anything else. And this goes internally as well. So if I'm the plant manager, if I'm the quality manager at the plant, and I want to review this using AI, our organization needs to have at least basic guardrails for what can and can't be done, how it's reported, which systems can be used. That's the other thing. There are hundreds of large language models available. There's a handful of very popular ones, but there's hundreds of them. And there are a lot of next generation database systems who have a component of AI. And I think that's necessary to know. So if you're using, a digital document management system and it is connected to AI, you need to know what it does, what the guardrails are, and what you accept. There is the risk of over-reliance. I've always said the expertise, we need your expertise. If you over-rely on this, you're not going to be we're not going to have the next crop of experts coming up. So it's got to be, like I said, treat it like the other person in the room. They're not right. They have an opinion where it's valid. We're going to listen to it. We can argue against it. We don't have to take it every time. You have to challenge it. There is the erosion of consistency is a problem. If you're a certification body, you've got 100 auditors and they're using 6 different platforms and they're all using different prompts and they're using it for different parts of the audit, it's going to be more of a mess than not using it all. It's because you're bringing in too many other variables. The legal requirements for transparency, I think, and again, inconsistent use. So one auditor is using it, another isn't. You only use it on some sites. I think you need to be very clear. So I think it's something we have to wrap our hands around. We can't deny, we can't ignore, but we also can't just throw the guardrails off and say, do whatever you want, however you want. I think it's inherent on us to understand how to get the best use out of these tools without introducing too many risks. My fear is if we hold back and don't do anything in, let's face how quick this is going, in months or years, we'll be so out of touch with it that there won't be people, you won't simply be able to catch up. So I think the risk is in uncontrolled use as well as non-use or ignoring it. The other thing to remember is, let's face it, none of these providers of these models are making any money. I don't expect them all to survive. So the one you're using may not be the one that you're using in 6 months because it may not be here. Something to keep in mind. So where we're going to go with this, where I expect it to go, and we're not going to jump to level 5. Right now, we're in the early adoption, the experimentation. We're trying to use it, maybe a little bit of level 2 with informal individual use is, I think, the mainstream where we're at. I have seen a couple of controlled pilots where they're starting to put some guardrails. They've defined which system can be used. They're starting to think about where it can be used, where can it be used, who can use it, how can use it, how it has to be documented. I haven't personally witnessed a truly governed organizational use. I've seen, certainly level 3 where you're starting to use it, but I don't think the governance is really in place that I have seen to any extent. And then, level 5 we're going to get to is it's just another tool. It's like your laptop. It's like your cell phone. It may be in the same format as we have now. It may be a completely different format or mechanism, but it's going to be used. But I think again, I'm going to stress, it's out there. We can't ignore it. We don't have to embrace it. We have to understand it. And the only understanding we get is from use, trial and error, finding out what works, what doesn't work. So running it parallel in some areas is the key to see, and comparing outputs, seeing where it does well and where it doesn't do well. So some of the key takeaways, it's there to an extent. It's not everybody by any means. I'm not going to hazard a guess to percentage. I had a pretty small sampling size of people who got in touch and I had conversations with, but it's definitely there. It's powerful. It has absolute limitations. It's not smart. It doesn't think. None of these are. That's okay. We're smart. We think. That's why we still have jobs and why we're going to continue to have jobs. Value depends on prompt quality, number 1, and your experience in using it, how to get the best, and what to watch for that doesn't work. So when it tells you, oh, that's a brilliant idea, you should, I didn't, I'll review it based on your new suggestion. That's a prompt, that's a flashing light, that's a sticker you got, a badge you got to make you feel good. It's fine. Enjoy it. A little bit of dopamine's a good thing. Best use. It's great support. It's good. It's a good team member, junior team member. Great help. It has some great capabilities. Risk. Misuse will reduce quality of things, everything. So it's there. There's good things. There's bad things. We need to manage and control what it is. So next steps for you, if I had a recommendation, and again, remember, I built this based on a lot of people that came forward asking some very, very basic questions. They've used it for job applications. They've used it to write little presentations. They've used it for speeches, things like that. They're kind of happy with it. They get it, but they're not. A lot of people aren't really ready to. They don't feel that they're past the point of being enamored by the simplicity of it. After you've done a couple of the same things and realize it's not that bright, it's consistent and it's useful, but it's not that bright. You're ready for the next step, and that's really what this was set at. So those of you who are really good at it, are using complex systems and really good prompting and enabled it and have it transparent in your systems, good for you. You're ahead of the game. This is more the people who understand what it is, who've used it a little bit and not quite you know, okay, now what do I do? I get it, but what do I do? So number one, learn prompt design. Build a library of prompts. It doesn't really remember your prompts. And don't use 3 different AI models. Pick one, maybe 2 if you want, one for visual stuff, one for intelligence stuff, or research, that's fine. But don't bounce around to all of them. Write your prompts outside. Write them on Word documents, save them in a file. You know, so that you're building, you know, if you had a 4-page prompt to review a audit, that's probably going to give you a really good outcome. You don't want to have to write that 4 pages every time. And it's not going to remember if you come back the next day. And remember, it doesn't save any files. So if you uploaded a copy of a standard or a set of requirements from a standard yesterday and said, review this section of the audit report based on these requirements, and then you come back the next day and say, hey, remember that thing I uploaded yesterday? Chances are it doesn't have it. Most of them will not retain any files unless you're paying for a much higher level version of it. Challenge your outputs. So really good prompts, then take it as a really junior, motivated employee that we got to check their work. Test it, challenge it, evaluate it. Make sure you know what it's good at, what you can trust and what you can't. Apply it responsibly and transparently. That's a big key. And this is where I think as leaders in food safety, we need to say it's okay in these areas. Because if you say it's not okay, it's going to be used. I mean, I guarantee every one of you have seen something on your desk and said, yeah, that's AI. So let's get the good stuff. And the potential for auditor training. I mean, you know, these days, the cost of oil, the environmental impact of travel, you know, think about how it could set up audit training models for upgrading auditors. Everybody, you know, everyone knows that building the next auditor pool is a huge cost and a huge impact and hard to do. This can be used to develop auditors. I really think it can. It can play, you know, it can play the back and forth with us. But it's all about being critical, governance, data protection, and really making sure you're validating. So that's where I wanted to go. I want to open it up. I'm just going to grab one more page here. Remember, use well, it strengthens audits. Use poorly, it can quietly erode their integrity. Accountability doesn't change. Okay, everybody's accountability in this doesn't change. Responsibility for decisions, for risk mitigation, and ultimately food safety sits with us, not with the tool. The tool is simply something that can help us be more effective and efficient. So the opportunity to use AI is here. We have to define how it gets used and how it's managed. So at this point, I'd like to open it up for discussion. I'm interested to hear interesting areas where you've seen it used or where you've heard someone using it. Any concerns you're really encountering? Some interesting areas you're exploring with it. So do we have any questions? Okay, Alison, if you don't mind reading them out.
Yeah, sure. So we've got a couple of questions here from Sean and from Mario. So thank you for those. Sean says, I agree. My biggest concern is the confidential nature of reports. So I find it best to use a local large language model. Quen 3.5 is currently working well for me to make sure that data is never actually shared with a third party. So my question is, in your experience, is there a particular local LLM that you have used which you rate better than others?
I haven't used many of the local ones. I find that some of them have been just copies or interpretations of the bigger ones. No, I've been a fan of using the bigger, more commercially minded ones, I guess. I have had a couple of subscriptions I've tried out. The nice thing is most of them all are, you can go for a month and then quit. So you can really try it and compare the results. I get the confidentiality part. And that's where I think governance is hugely important, that there may well be some information you do not ever want to be put on a cloud. And I think that's the way to evaluate it is, you know, if your organization has guardrails on what can and can't be, or what, you know, what high security storage areas do we need beyond the typical, I think that's where you need to use it. You know, my opinion, anything on somebody's laptop is, you know, you've already said, well, yeah, we think chances are that's going to, you know, that's going to get seen by somebody, and we're okay with that. It might be a little embarrassing, it might be inconvenient, but it's not going to destroy us as a business. If you send it in an email, if you attach it in an email, I think you treat it the same way. So if there's something you wouldn't put on email, it's for, you know, I have done audits where I've asked for HACCP plans, and they say, no, you can read them in the plant, but we're not saying we don't email HACCP plans anywhere. Okay, that's fair. I can do it. I respect those guardrails. So I think treating it the same way is better than necessarily splitting to the smaller models. And again, I mean, if you're using a model for 6 months and it disappears, it goes bankrupt, it gets bought by somebody and folded into something else, I don't think you're losing that much, especially if you've archived your prompts. You know, I've got a whole file in my laptop on prompts for various things that I've used consistently. I think that's important. That's going to give you the ability to transition to a new model if you see one, if you need to transition to a new model. So I know, real roundabout answer, no, I don't have recommendations, and I was going to be very cautious about not recommending anything because I haven't given the depth, and I think especially I haven't evaluated the security side of enough models to really say I would suggest this one. From an output standpoint, yeah, I tend to like a couple of the bigger ones for certain tasks. For the visual stuff, one is good. For the research based, that really controlling the science based side of it, another one is good. But smaller ones, no, can't help you on that. Nelson.
Okay, thank you. So Mario has said, thanks a lot, John. Could you please elaborate more on the application of the corrective action review, specifically for the root cause analysis quality?
Right. So again, prompt. So, and if I was going to do, my thought on the best way to do it, Mario, is I'm going to put in the whole audit report, all of my findings, and I'm going to look, and then I'm going to focus on one nonconformance. And if I could get any additional information to upload with it, like consumer complaints, recall data for that site, if I could, you know, I'm going to identify what country it's in so that they can look, you know, and request that the model look at nonconformance and recall data and regulatory issues in that region, in that country, specific to it. And then build the guard. So give it all the possible information, challenge it to get all the information so it can make the most intelligent assessment. Remind it that you want it to consider root cause analysis. So what, you know, if we've got a nonconformance, they send in all their evidence, could be photographic, could be documents, procedures, training logs, whatever. It will be able to assess, you know, what is the likelihood that all of that will result in, does it align with an expected root cause? I'm going to be cautious to always say expected or normal root cause instead of the absolute, because whether it's a person auditing or using AI, I don't think it's a guarantee because of the complexity of what we work with. But asking it to review, identifying, you know, does this point towards a true root cause? If you've only got a single audit report, you don't have all it's going to do is look through the entirety of the audit report. It can't look back a couple of years if you're not giving it that information, if you're not giving it any nonconformance or recall or complaint data. It's only going to look in there. It will take a broader look to see, is the root cause looking at, you know, insufficient training is the onboarding training is the root cause because the person didn't wash, you know, too many people weren't washing their hands properly. That would be, you know, Sure, that's good. We have to, how do we correct that? We're going to improve the onboarding training. We're going to make it annual. We're going to have valid verifications at a certain frequency to make sure it's being followed, and so we're going to do all of that. But where AI may come in is it may pick up something else that we may not necessarily relate, but it may say that, actually, there's, sanitation issues on this shift were also identified, and that tends to be the shift that you found the hand washing, and there have been issues with water quality on that shift. So it may pull in stuff that we didn't necessarily connect the dots on. That's where it's going to go. It will call out where it's a fluff answer, where it's a fluff closure nonconformance, or a standard, training nonconformance or corrective action. We just add training. It will jump through that as a root cause pretty quick, which is nice. So I think what it does is it takes a broader view of all the, not just nonconformances. And this is where I would upload the entire audit report, because there are a lot of observations. Auditors do a great job of putting observations in their reports. And sometimes those observations lead, if they are added together, may give a different perspective than just looking at a singular nonconformance in its corrective action. So I think it brings much wider context that, as an auditor, and those of you who've audited, it's a heavy load. So the fact that you weren't able to take, always take a broad view of the context of the entire audit and the organization and where they are, that's okay. I think that's where it can help. So that's where I would use. If you're looking at a broad, if you're a certification body and you're looking at reviewing dozens of reports a week, or you're looking at your supply chain and you're looking at 20 audit report reviews a month or a week, that's where finding consistent nonconformances, corrective actions, and root cause analyses may point to deficiencies within the system. So if we're consistently seeing in our suppliers from this part of the world issues on moldy pallets coming in, it may give us the opportunity to put a more efficient solution in place. So instead of dealing with 40 facilities that happen to have that occasionally get moldy pallets, we can identify that actually it's all coming from one supplier. If we, as the customer, if I jump the queue and instead of chewing out 40 different suppliers, I can jump the queue and go right to the pallet manufacturer and work with them to provide a solution. That's where it becomes more powerful as well. How are we doing?
Okay, we've got a couple more comments. Actually, Sean, thank you for your input here, because there's a lot here. I'm just going to address the first one, which is ideally we need scheme owners to take the lead, with certification bodies playing a key role. For example, BRCGS just has a statement that says you cannot use AI. That's not really what BRGS said, but that's how it gets interpreted, which is completely unrealistic. Auditors, on the other hand, use it, but do not declare it to the certification body because they are worried that they would get in trouble. This is the crux of our presentation today, I think, really. So we don't get oversight of it either. If the scheme owners took a more proactive approach, certification bodies can implement controls for auditors to follow. So that's his point.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I say. I'm not a fan of throwing the gates open and see what happens. But certainly I would say the scheme, probably starts at the top. So top will be the customers. So this be the retailers and manufacturers who are looking down their supply chain and saying, if you need to get this GFSI benchmark certificate, you should also be identifying what you will and won't accept AI being included. That can filter down through GFSI, through the benchmark standards, through other standards, through your own auditing, through your internal auditing program, and filter down through the certification bodies into the auditors. And I think, like I said, I think being an absolute, you're not allowed to use it ever at all, is really kind of sticking your head in the sand and more likely saying, I don't want to know about it. then, I mean, it is being used. People, I've talked to enough people, and I've worked with enough companies on implementing strategies for the use of AI in their internal audit program, in their supply chain evaluation, and a lot of it is really, you start with the basic guardrails. You don't start with a be all end all, we've got a perfect solution. You 3 areas where you can use it and 3 areas where you can't use it. That's year 1. See how it works out, and then you adjust. It's the same way. Look at the standards. BRCGS is what, 25 years old now, 30 years old. The first one was 6 pages long and pretty simple. And over time, it evolved based on use and areas where it was found to be lacking, areas where it found to be good, and it evolved to now it's a big honking document. I know BRC a little bit more than others, but all the standards are the same. So this is where we need to start with AI. Not a moonshot right now, but boy, we better start using it in some areas. At least, if not as an assistant, as a parallel process in some areas. Let's understand it. Prove it wrong. Prove it is a dumb idea. Absolutely, I'd love it. But at least you've said, I've looked at it for this application. We've tested it this way. We found it too lacking. We refuse, we do not allow it to be used in this case. But you better open the door to find out where, because it is a hugely valuable tool. It provides efficiency. Any certification body, any standard owner will tell you their number 1 issue is there aren't enough auditors. Well, if you can reduce the workload of auditors by 10% using AI, that's like getting 10% more auditors. You're not going to get that any other way. So anyone who doesn't use this as a tool intelligently is going to be a bit of a challenge.
Okay, thank you. And we've got one more from Sean, which I think we've got just about time for, because bearing in mind our time constraints are coming up to the hour. When you upload a full audit report, how do you get around the scheme owner contractual obligations or the contract with a certification body that audit data is kept confidential? Would you not consider that sharing with a third party for processing, even if said third party themselves will keep that data confidential, would not be in line with the contract? Or does any CB you do audits for say in their contracts that data can be shared for those purposes?
So again, this comes back down to, I know when I have uploaded, I've always gotten permission to upload anything. No, I have never uploaded a copy of the standard or parts thereof. I get permission, and where there is IP involved, I include that in my prompt. This is to be treated as IP. It is not, I mean, the only place I would guess you could probably find just about anything already on the internet, as far as data or, profile, you can find a lot of it. The one restriction I do say quite often is this information is not to be used as learning or training for your model or for your understanding. It may not be shared outside of this conversation. And I trust that as much as I trust email, as much as I trust the fact that I know my television microphone is on all the time, even when the TV's off and it's listening to everything I say. That's why I get the ads for, a flight to France after talking about, boy, wouldn't it be nice to go on a vacation to France? And suddenly all of my social media is covered in, vacations to France. I know how that works. I accept it. It's part of the fact that I can use the internet for free, essentially. I'll take the ads and I'll take the minor intrusion, but I will also not put my credit card out for everybody to see. So, or, I don't save my credit card on airline platforms. So I think, how do you get around it? You don't get around it. You have to openly embrace it. You have to be forward and show that a certification body has to include in their contract with their customer they're doing an audit for a clause where they will and will not use AI. If they don't have it, they're free to use it wherever. Customers have to accept, people that are being audited have to use it for their internal audits. They have to use it for their supply chain. They have to accept that their auditor may use it, that their certification body may use it, that it's it is just being used, I don't believe the risk is any greater than emailing a copy of an audit report to somebody. So, you know, unless you're just doing everything through the mail, you're already exposing digital information. You've got good security systems, as good as could be reasonably expected. I believe the LLMs have that. You can be cautious. You know, you can say, okay, oh boy, you know, HACCP plans. Well, yeah, you can't put entire HACCP plans uploaded. You can do the, you know, you can upload the team list and all of the CVs for those people, and ask it, as you know, are we good? Are there any competencies that aren't being covered? I think that's perfectly fair. But how do you prevent it, or how do you? I don't think we can prevent it. I think we have to have guardrails. I think guardrails of complete exclusion of use are going to lead to problems. And so I think it's the transparency, but being very firm in the security and the guardrail, more so the guardrails you've got on how it could be used, where it could be used, and transparency. So I'm getting to hurry up and finish. So hopefully that answered that question. I mean, let's face it, you know, a year ago, 2 years ago, this wasn't a thing. A year ago, it kind of was a thing. You used it for a little bit. Now we're using it, probably a lot of people are using it on a daily basis, if not weekly. In 6 months, who knows how long, you know, it will be an integral part of what we do. It'll be, you know, how many devices have you bought that have AI connected already in them? You know, it's not the easiest thing to do. So with that, listen, I really want to heartfully thank all of you that joined us today, and that responded to the original point I put out. And I guess I wanted to poke the bear a little bit with that. I've welcome you as well to continue the conversation. If any of you want to get in touch, just to have a discussion, always willing to do that. Or if you would like to have a more detailed connection on how we can help you build those guardrails, train your staff, do more better things with AI, always welcome to have that conversation. Great to have it. Anyways, have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it, and take care.